In this session, we'll be completing the certificate enrollment to obtain a trusted ID cert for use with ISE. And then as we finish the section, we'll be making some changes to how radius logging behaves. Our ISE application server got restarted from the last section. We got logged out. Here we're back at the login screen for ISE. We're still seeing the trust warning at this point, but if we issue the login and start to interact with ISE, we should see that change. And sure enough, now we've got no particular warnings from the ID cert that ISE is currently sending us. I should point out that as part of this lab setup, the trusted CA cert for the lab has been added to the Firefox browser, and so any received ID certs that have been signed by that are now also trusted. If we look at the contents of this cert, you can see that we've got a secure connection, and if we look at more details, we can view the contents of that ID cert. We can see the subject information corresponds to what I supplied in the certificate signing request, and we can also see the subject alternative names or SANs that were added to that cert. Signer, and down below here we should be able to see validation period as well. Okay, back on ISE, let's fine-tune what we want this certificate to be used for. Go into Administration, Certificates. We see under our system certificates, we see still in place is the default self-signed server certificate and the one that was just added from our root CA. And of course it's got kind of an oddball name in there, which we can straighten out here. Okay, for use with this certificate, we'll add a friendly name. And we can see the SANs listed here as well. It's already in use for admin. We're seeing the evidence of that by the trust that we're obtaining from the Firefox browser. We'll also want to use this trusted ID cert for EAP authentication, and it lets us know that only a single cert can be supplied for EAP overall within our system deployment. And so this will remove EAP support from the self-signed certificate and place it on this new trusted ID certificate. And we'll also set it up for portal usage. In this case, not specific to any portal, we'll add a portal group tag that we can apply when we go to configure a portal. We configure or select this portal group tag, and it will apply this trusted ID cert. And then we'll save that. We get a server response that we were successful. We can see our renamed certificate and what it's currently being used for, and almost all functions have been removed from the original self-signed certificate. Okay, for purposes of the lab, we're going to make some modifications to radius settings. We'll step through this process here now. Go to the Administration, System, and Settings. You can see a variety of settings, and we'll be poking in this area for future sessions. In this case, we're wanting to select protocols and radius. And in particular, what we're wanting for our lab purposes is to prevent the suppression of failed client login attempts, that we want to see those and not have those suppressed. And then likewise, we want to not suppress successful authentications. These are left on by default to prevent overutilization of disk space on the nodes that are running the monitoring or MNT personas, and this will the suppression reduces the size of the logging that's needed, and it just dampens the level of detail. So it might be helpful to uncheck these options as we're doing for the lab support in an early install or early deployment of ISE to make sure you're clearly understanding all the potential effects, and then once things are working to your needs initially, then we can check these boxes back on and save that disk space. Lets us know that we've modified those changings may take a moment to take effect. You see the confirmation message down the bottom, and I also wanted to point out that if you're not sure what options were checked or unchecked, you can always issue or click this reset to defaults button to restore those original Cisco default settings. Okay, in this session we finished out the establishment of a trusted ID cert for use with the ISE. In particular, we're already seeing the positive impacts for that for administrative browsing into ISE, and ultimately this will provide positive impacts for any PC or endpoint device that's receiving an ID cert, that we've got the opportunity to create trust around that by simply trusting that CA, importing and trusting that CA into an endpoint, or perhaps considering distribution with something like a Microsoft domain policy, which is a nice fit for that Microsoft-based certificate authority that we're using.